So hooray, it's almost winter here in Blighty, which means the prospect of actually going outside is about as enticing as smearing your tackle with tuna and sprinting nude through a cat cafe. So hey, why not just stay inside and strap on a shiny white helmet and escape to a virtual world where it isn't endlessly moist and murky? Even an apocalyptic wasteland where you're constantly set upon by murderous beasties is still preferable to a wet weekend in Milton Keynes. Now the MetaQuest 3 and the fresh new MetaQuest 3S VR headsets can both run any game on that Meta store, and there are dozens and dozens of absolute bangers on there now. So here's my pick of the best games you can play on the MetaQuest 3 and 3S right now, and these are solo single player affairs in case, just like me, you've got no mates. Now for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now, if you want a game that is pure spectacle to really show off what the MetaQuest 3 is capable of, well, Asgard's Wrath 2 is one of the shiniest, spangliest titles out there. Packed to the armpits with gorgeous 90Hz visuals, cinematic quality audio, and some spectacular levels. And thankfully you don't need to have played the first game to understand what on earth is going on in Asgard's Wrath 2. Well, to be honest, for most of its running time I had not a bloody clue what was happening. Something to do with gods possessing mortal men just for and giggles or something. The main thing is you get to decapitate legions of hellish demony things in a frequently hilarious fashion. And bashing in faces is rather fun, if inevitably slightly repetitive. Just make sure you've got plenty of arm swinging space in your chosen room so you don't end up sticking your fist through a window or punching out your gran. Thankfully there's also the occasional oversized boss to conquer, as well as simple puzzles to solve, some of which involve switching between godly and human forms. And there's plenty of other busy work including crafting type shenanigans and collectibles, as well as a big old upgrade tree to complete, so plenty of stuff to keep you from getting bored. Now while most VR adventures tend to end before the hour count hits double digits, Asgard's Wrath serves up dozens of hours of gameplay which can be extended by exploring every nook and cranny of the world and indulging in a few little side quests. Sadly, there doesn't feel too much point in exploring too hard because you're very much steered down a very specific path, but the devs do throw in the occasional fresh new gameplay element to keep things from getting stale. Now, another sizable adventure that makes the most of the MetaQuest 3 is Assassin's Creed Nexus VR. This isn't a VR conversion of an existing title, it's a fresh, all-new escapade, so fans of the Assassin's Creed series should be destroying their pants in utter delight. You get to step into the blood-soaked shoes of some classic murdery folk from the AC universe, including Ezio and Cassandra, jumping between the different characters and time periods as the game progresses to keep things feeling fresh. Each town feels impressively grand and well populated for a VR title. These locations obviously aren't anywhere near as big as their console counterparts, but they're still a satisfying playground for your runny, jumpy, stabby exploits. As usual, you'll be scaling structures, stealthily infiltrating compounds, and occasionally fighting off angry guards when it all goes a bit pear-shaped. Parkouring your way across rooftops involves just aiming your head and pressing A, so it's super intuitive, while combat is just as easy to master. And yes, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR can be a wee bit janky at times, shall we say, like any ambitious virtual reality title out there, but it's well worth the slight occasional bit of balkiness, and it runs surprisingly well on both the MetaQuest 3 and the new budget-friendly MetaQuest 3S. Now, one of my biggest surprises on the MetaQuest 3 so far is the Seventh Guest, a VR reboot of that cheesy FMV 90s adventure. I was expecting a simple retread with the same clunky puzzles dusted off and chucked about a carnival-style spook house, but what we actually got was a loving homage that felt both familiar and also very fresh. What the devs did was take the original deeply flawed title and actually made it fun to play. So now you've got a variety of interesting and generally well-integrated brain ticklers filling each room of Stouff's mansion. Yeah, you'll still stumble across the obligatory chess puzzle and a rather tiresome spider maze that I really could have done without, but Seventh Guest on the MetaQuest 3 feels like a whole new game, complete with some brilliantly implemented FMV cutscenes and a clever wee time-manipulating lantern. If you fancy a more cerebral experience, complete with a healthy side serving of cheese, you really can't go wrong. The Seventh Guest isn't actually that scary, truth be told, especially if you've already checked out proper horror games like Exorcist Legion VR. Trust me, that one will empty your bowels faster than a laxative sandwich. Your family will get a proper kick out of hearing you shriek like a startled goat. Just make sure you've stocked up on adult nappies first. And another scary pants MetaQuest 3 and 3S game that'll have you doing the John Wayne shuffle of shame to the toilets is Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners. This melancholic post-apocalyptic tale is a first-person survival horror that's almost as terrifying as real life. Your mission is to hunt down a legendary bunker filled with the ultimate treasure, as much pot noodle as you can fork into your face. You'll be scrabbling around for clues to the location as well as scavenging for resources to stay alive, all while dodging or double killing any brain goblin undead gits. The stealth mechanics are actually pretty decent for a VR title, and let me tell you, taking down a zombie unawares with a screwdriver or a pair of scissors right through the ear never gets tiresome. Of course, you can't just poke that old shiv into their head with a pathetic jab. You need to properly swing it right into their skull to penetrate deep into that crumbly brain and put their lights out for good. Otherwise, you'll just piss them off a bit. And if you enjoyed Saints and Sinners, well, great news. You can keep that gore flowing with a bit of Chapter 2 Retribution, which is available now, which is even more gruey and silly and over the top and ridiculously good fun. The fresh new terrifying night raids reward you with big loot payoffs, providing you actually survive the crowds of knocked off nocturnal brain coveters. But thankfully you can kit yourself out with Retribution's upgraded arsenal, chopping down hordes of flesh gobblers with a massive chainsaw, or blasting them to bits with a sawn or shotgun. Yes, bloody please. Oh, and you'll also face off against a Resident Evil Nemesis style big scary dude, so definitely keep that spare pair of pants on standby. And if that's not enough zombie bait in action, well, definitely check out Arizona Sunshine 2, which is available now again for the Quest 3 and the Quest 3S, and is bloody good fun. This schlocky sequel takes the addictive gunplay from the first game and adds in one of the greatest virtual reality game companions of all time, Buddy, who's a very, very good dog indeed. Not only does he fetch you useful items, saving you from bending over and snatching them up yourself, but he can even tear the ghoulies off of shuffling zombie types before they get a chance to munch on your very own soft tissue. The only problem being, you won't want him clearing out all these rooms for you, because taking down a zombie with an immaculate headshot is so satisfying. Exploring Arizona Sunshine's dilapidated buildings and landscapes is rarely dull, with some standout set pieces scattered throughout to boost the old adrenaline. Besides the occasional inevitable jank and a lack of a proper inventory and a few other little qualms, it's hard to find much to really moan at here. It's another corpse capping classic. And I've also got to big up Zombieland Headshot Fever, which is a pretty fun wave shooter based off of those Woody Harrelson flicks. The simple yet frantic gameplay is a good way to burn off some of that stress from dealing with other human folk all day long, especially if you pretend that the shuffling brain slurpers are your bumbling work colleagues. Take that, Kevin, you decomposing cockwomble. If you'd rather shoot Nazis in the face rather than zombies, well, check out Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. This tosses you onto the front line in World War II, and as you dodge in explosions on battlefields, infiltrating enemy HQs, commandeering tanks, and hurtling down snowy mountains. Now, I've been a massive fan of the Medal of Honor games ever since the Thrilling Originals came out on Sony's very first PlayStation. Yes, I am an old twat. And this VR release certainly does the series justice. Above and Beyond is one of the most cinematic games on the MetaQuest, throwing some majestic and memorable set pieces at you, with plenty of satisfying gunplay and some suspenseful stealthy moments too. As well as the obligatory multiplayer mode, Above and Beyond also serves up a generous slice of meaty single-player campaign goodness which will last you hours and hours. Although admittedly a significant chunk is taken up with lengthy cutscenes and chatty bits to dump info and break up that action. Still, this Medal of Honor VR experience is one of the most engrossing and enjoyable MetaQuest 3 titles. Now, if I had a quid every time that Resident Evil 4 was re-released in some fashion, I was going to say I'd probably have enough money to quit this YouTube bollocks and go live somewhere that wasn't perpetually dark and miserable, but actually I'd probably only have about 28 quid. But the MetaQuest port is well worth a squint even if you've completed Resi 4 many times before, as it puts you right in the beefcake body of Leon S. Kennedy as he shoots angry Europeans in the face over and over and over again. From that opening assault on the village to the khaki-pants Barney with a giant lake Gribbly, Resident Evil 4 is still one of the most entertaining games ever designed. In first person, that combat feels more fluid as well as more personal, And thankfully I didn't feel too motion sick despite dodging all over the place, avoiding flying axes and chainsaw dickheads. Unfortunately, cutscenes and brief cutaways are still played out as a simple 2D movie rather than from your perspective, which is kind of jarring at times and just kind of piss all over the immersion a bit. But minor gripes aside, this VR port works really well. Get it in ya. If you fancy a more light-hearted VR experience, albeit one that can still be quite tense at times, we'll definitely check out the I Expect You to Die series. This tongue-in-cheek adventure slaps you in the sexy tux of a secret agent and thrusts you into various perilous, far-fetched situations. You'll need all of your wits to solve the many puzzles and escape each scenario unharmed, so definitely don't go down in too many martinis first. With its tongue-in-cheek humour, clever mind twisters and impressive interactivity, I Expect You to Die is an absolute delight, albeit one with limited replayability. Good thing that there's 3 of them then, and I swear they either get harder with each release or I'm just getting stupider. Just please don't speculate as to which one it is in the comments. Thank you very much. For a proper action-packed MetaQuest 3 game, well, check out Runner, a shooty biking extravaganza that was clearly more than a little bit inspired by the awesome Akira anime. It's not subtle, but it is stylish, and you won't be bored by a single second, taking down seemingly endless swarms of baddies while trying your best not to smash into the many obstacles that pop up in your path. I'm not gonna lie, Runner will probably wear down your resolve a bit if you don't happen to have the reflexes of a highly caffeinated cat, and I myself, as an old git, certainly do not. The learning curve is pretty steep as well, as you need to juggle steering with shooting off your bike cannons and pistols, hoying grenades, taking down shields, all kind of shenanigans. But once it all clicks, you will feel like the ultimate badass, carving a path through swaths of enemies and beating 7 shades out of the obligatory tough as nails bosses at the end of each level. And for more fast, frantic action on the MetaQuest 3 and the MetaQuest 3S, absolutely do not miss Pistol Whip. This is basically an on-rail shooter where your sole purpose is to pick off every bugger what pops up. Each level is set to a different song and you get bonus points for plugging your foes in time to the beat, so it's kinda like an ultra-violent version of Just Dance. The best thing about Pistol Whip is it makes you feel like a proper badass, even if you're just a bald and middle-aged dickhead poncing about in his living room. Chalk up another win to virtual reality over actual reality. And sure, the campaign's plot is about as meaty as a vegan sausage roll, but you'll have so much fun bopping and blasting that you will not even care. And the core game is regularly updated with fresh levels, so there's always a reason to return. Those funky cartoony visuals reminded me of another game, Super Hot, and don't worry if Johnny or Jane wants to play this game because it is kiddie friendly. When you plug someone, you won't see their kidneys spraying across the nearest wall or anything. There isn't so much as a splash of blood in the entire thing. And speaking of Super Hot, that is yet another banging VR title you should certainly get yourself for the MetaQuest 3 or the MetaQuest 3S. The hook here is that enemies move only when you do, so at any time you can freeze and plan out your next move. Should I grab this guy's gun and blast him in the face with it, or maybe just take him down with a well-aimed pool ball to the nads? Heads up though, you will need a good bit of free space to play this one, as you actually have to move around the room, ducking and dodging, and uppercutting some dude's junk. I've also been rather enjoying Fracked, which is a run about the place shooting people in their big stupid heads while throwing yourself behind the nearest box type situation. There's absolutely nothing clever about this VR game, especially the endless supply of carbon copy minions that you'll come up against who have the combined intelligence of a sack of dead squirrels. But Fracked has rarely a dull moment, even when you're pretend clambering up cliff sides or across rickety structures. And you'll likely have a massive grin on your face the entire time. Yeah, Fracked most definitely one to check out, at the very least if you spot it on sale. And last up for the action games, I'm a big fan of Robo Recall, a fun and fast-paced arcade title that has you blasting and slapping rogue robots into tiny metal chunks. It's simple but highly addictive carnage and definitely an essential purchase for the MetaQuest 3. Now if you're well up for proper adorable platform and VR type shenanigans here on the MetaQuest 3S or the MetaQuest 3, definitely check out Lucky's Tale. This puts you in control of the titular big-eyed fox thing as he leaps around several colourful environments, murdering all of the local wildlife and generally being a wee furry nuisance, just like real foxes then. There's again not much of a story here, something about your pig getting swiped by a bug-eyed tentacle thing, but it really doesn't matter. What's important is that the platforming is an absolute joy, as long as you can handle some occasionally tricky, well-timed 3D jumps. That difficulty level is just about challenging enough for adults to enjoy, helped along by the added time trials and coin collection challenges. But younger gamers should also be able to make it all the way through without much trouble. Likewise, if you're a fan of the old platforming games and you've got yourself a MetaQuest 3S or a MetaQuest 3, definitely check out the Moss games. These star an adorable wee mousie as she runs around lushly detailed environments, twatting robo bugs with her tiny sword. Gameplay mostly involves tinkering with each mini level to open up the exit, which you'll do by directly guiding Quill the mouse around using the left thumbstick, as well as grabbing and yanking things with your own disembodied hands. It's a rather intuitive setup, albeit one with occasionally mildly irritating platformy moments. Every so often you'll find yourself battling a bunch of bugs with your sword, which helps to break up the puzzling shenanigans and inject a wee bit of excitement. That difficulty level is again low, but Moss is still great fun, and the sequel, Book 2, is a direct continuation of the story. Another fantastical fairy tale that's well worth experiencing in virtual reality is Escaping Wonderland, a standalone story from the Down the Rabbit Hole folks. Down the Rabbit Hole as well, certainly well worth a gander if you fancy a more soothing, gentle VR experience. Yeah, this is definitely the pair for you. Wonderland is a true joy to explore thanks to the alluring cartoon visuals and top-notch production, from the charming voice work to the atmospheric soundtrack. Don't expect particularly taxing puzzles that'll cause your brains to liquefy and leak out of your nostrils. This is very much an interactive storybook with occasional light puzzling elements, albeit one that's technically very impressive. Lovely stuff. But if you're after an immersive and gorgeous adventure game that'll really test your mental faculties, well, one of my favourites right now is Red Matter. This sci-fi adventure has you exploring a spookily deserted space base, figuring out environmental puzzles while also figuring out what the ruddy heck actually happens here. You'll be pulling levers, tweaking knobs and fiddling with machinery to progress deeper into the base's bowels, helped along by an incredibly useful scanner which can translate Russian text and also tell you what stuff is before you muck around with it. The second Red Matter is a direct continuation of the story and basically more of the same. You got gorgeous graphics, impressive interactivity and a thick, ominous atmosphere. And on the MetaQuest 3 you will enjoy proper 4K textures, dynamic shadows and lots of other visual upgrades that'll make you go, ooh, that's rather pretty. And any MetaQuest owners who love an adventure, or anyone who's simply dropped a shitload of shrooms recently and fancies a bit of a head trip, should certainly check out A Fisherman's Tale. In this one you're a wooden puppet who lives in a lighthouse, naturally, who spends his spare time working on a small wooden replica of the homestead. But one day when you lift the roof off, well, you discover a tiny version of yourself inside that model. And not just that, but your own home's roof appears to have completely vanished and now an enormous U is looming overhead. Thus begins an absolute mindfuck of a VR game where you basically have to pass various items between your differently sized incarnations in order to solve environmental puzzles. It's too early in the morning to even begin to explain this thing. It's a work of pure genius, and getting through each chapter will take some proper lateral thinking, as well as some thorough exploration and perhaps a healthy dose of illicit substances. Factor in the emotional story and some slick presentation, and this is one of my favourite titles for MetaQuest 3. And good news for fans, because a sequel is also available, and it's another cracker. This time you find yourself marooned on a desert island with the ability to swap your wooden hands for various other implements, and also, somewhat amusingly, launch your head across the room. Those puzzles once again get quite trippy, so brace yourself for some serious thinking outside of the box. Now, I've got to say, one of the most addictive games that I played on the MetaQuest 3S and the MetaQuest 3 is Walkabout Mini Golf. If you're a fan of the old putt-putt, then you'll absolutely ruddy adore this thing. Holes range from your usual fare with rocks and tunnels to absolutely batshit mental efforts that you'll never actually see on a real-life course, taking full advantage of those VR escapades. There's a hardcore version of each course to tackle once you're confident, you got missing balls to find dotted all over the place, and basically hours of absolute joy thanks to the realistic physics and stellar design work. And the devs have kindly added some bonus courses as well, so there's tons of really enjoyable holes to get stuck into and really perfect your ball technique. Now another VR mind bender is the Last Clockwinder, which sees you striving to save an ancient clockwork tree with the help of magical robot cloning gloves. And I am aware that that sentence makes it sound like I've just been huffing angel dust all morning, but it does kind of make sense when you're playing. What you'll essentially be doing is harvesting fruit. Lots of fruit. But you can't do this single-handed. Instead, just push a button on your controller and record yourself performing an action like plucking a bit of fruit and tossing it merrily into a collection barrel, and push that button again and poof, up pops a robot slave who will happily repeat that action over and over. At first, you'll be trying to set up the most efficient robo labs possible, but as you unlock more rooms with more complex requirements, you'll find that these robots really must work together with perfect timing to get any kind of results. Thankfully, if any of these robots go a wee bit wrong, you can just scrap them with a push of a button, which, believe me, you'll be doing hundreds and hundreds of times before you even potentially see the game's credits. And there is a sweet wee story which is gradually revealed via conveniently scattered tape recorders, the kind of shit that game developers just can't get enough of. Now, if you can't be arsed with all that going to the gym bollocks, but the old guts starting to expand with all the beers and pie, well, no worries. Thanks to the MetaQuest 3 and 3S, you can get a proper workout now in the old homestead. And the one I recommend the most is Mills Bodycombat. A one-off fee grants you access to dozens of intense workouts that really engage every muscle in your body. And by engage every muscle, I mean it'll absolutely punish you until you're a sweaty, flabby puddle of human flesh. You can play in mixed reality if you want to stay aware of your surroundings, always a good idea when you're flailing your fists about. And the DLC is well worth it if you find that you're enjoying that main game a lot. And quite a few other companies appear to have jumped on the old fitness bandwagon, so there's quite a few alternatives available now for the MetaQuest 3 and the 3S, but a lot of them do require a monthly or a yearly subscription, which is why I stick with the old Les Mills. I also have to give big love to Synth Riders, an excellent rhythm game that has you fist pumping all over the place to punch coloured balls before they smack you right in the mug. There's a great selection of tunes to bop along to, and their catalogue of tunes is constantly expanding to help keep the game feeling fresh. And we've also got to big up Smash Drums, which is great for anyone who loves beating the living snot out of inanimate objects until it feels like their arms are about to drop off. And last up, I heartily recommend Samba De Amigo, which has you shaking your maracas in time to a bunch of bangers, including Bon Jovi, Culture Club, Marshmello, even OK Go. With some fun mini-games breaking up the action to max out your score and some gorgeously vibrant cartoon graphics, there's nothing not to love here, apart from possibly the Jonas Brothers. And there you have it, kiddies. That right there is my pick of the very best games you can play single player right now on the MetaQuest 3S and the MetaQuest 3 VR helmets. Now, there were a few I really enjoyed that I simply just had to scrap from the list because this video was getting ridiculously long, so big up to the likes of The Room VR and of course all those classics like Beat Saber and Tetris. Did I miss off your own personal favourites? Well, definitely call me a massive ding dong in the comments below and let us know what your personal picks are. Please do subscribe, ding that notifications bell and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!